You probably know that some animated characters are inspired by real-life stories, but did you know that SUZY Sheep, Peppa Pig's inseparable best friend, is a perfect example of this? In fact, the story that inspired one of the most important characters in Peppa's world is surprisingly sad and even a bit dark. The true story. This shocking tale began in a small rural village in England in 1833. A little girl named SUZY, just 4 years old, lived there with her mother. Her father had passed away shortly before she was born, a victim of a disease that no one at the time knew how to treat. Since then, her mother did everything she could to care for SUZY, working as a shepherdess on a local farm. SUZY's routine was harsh for a child. Every morning, she accompanied her mother to the pasture, helping to feed and care for the sheep. Despite it all, what weighed most heavily on her was loneliness. Living in a village populated only by adults and the elderly, she had no other children to play or talk with. Her days were filled with dreams of going to school and, perhaps, finding a real friend. However, reality was far from her dreams. On what seemed like an ordinary day, SUZY and her mother went to check on the sheep in the pen and stumbled upon a horrifying scene. One of the sheep was lifeless, with a deep wound that appeared to have been caused by an axe. What was even more shocking was that a part of the animal's body was missing, the eyes. This gruesome detail sparked rumors throughout the village. Many believed this wasn't the work of mere thieves but someone involved in witchcraft. After all, bandits typically took entire animals and didn't leave behind such terrifying scenes. Consequences. The story quickly reached the farm owner's ears, and he was far from pleased. Even though there was no evidence to identify the culprit, he decided to punish SUZY's mother by reducing her already meager wages. For SUZY and her mother, who struggled daily just to survive, this was a devastating blow. Now, SUZY's mother had to sacrifice even more. She began skipping meals, eating only every other day so her daughter would have something on her plate. Watching her mother suffer like this was unbearable for the little girl, who felt powerless to change their unfair circumstances. Nightmare. It's clear that SUZY's story began with a series of terrible events. From a young age, her routine seemed normal. Her mother worked on the farm and cared for her with endless love. But on the night of the tragic sheep incident, a cycle of despair began. Every night, SUZY prayed for things to get better, but the opposite happened. Sheep after sheep on the farm mysteriously died. These weren't ordinary deaths. Parts of the animals' bodies were removed as if they were part of a gruesome puzzle. This mystery quickly spiraled into chaos for SUZY and her family. When the deaths continued, and all the sheep had perished, farm owner was furious. He pointed at SUZY's mother, accusing her of being a witch. During that time, people were ruled by fear and superstition and didn't hesitate to blame innocent women for unexplainable disasters. SUZY's mother was swiftly judged, without evidence, and sentenced to death by fire. Imagine SUZY's heartbreak as she watched her mother dragged to the village square, hearing her agonized screams as she was burned alive. This scene was etched into SUZY's memory forever. If you think this story is filled with injustice, comment below injustice. Abandoned and alone. After her mother's execution, SUZY was left with no support or shelter. The farm owner refused to let her continue working there, claiming she had no right to the wages her mother used to earn. Penniless and abandoned, SUZY faced a harsh reality. Starving and without a roof over her head, she wandered the village looking for work, but the townsfolk feared her. They believed she might be a witch, just like her mother was accused of being. Rejected by everyone, SUZY survived for days without food, drinking only what she could find. Her frail body could endure no more. That's when an old traveler passing through the village found her and decided to help. Ignoring the villagers' warnings that she was dangerous, he took her to his remote cabin in the woods. There, SUZY was given food, water, and a bath, comfort she hadn't experienced in a long time. For the first time in weeks, she could rest without fear. As SUZY began to trust the old man, he revealed something shocking. He knew her father and claimed her mother's story about his death wasn't true. According to him, SUZY's father hadn't died of an illness as she'd been told but had been brutally murdered. The old man explained that he and SUZY's father were longtime friends who worked together as shepherds. A mysterious client frequently came to buy sheep but never disclosed what he did with them. While others were curious, SUZY's father chose not to ask questions, as the money provided essential support for his family. One day, however, SUZY's father decided he could no longer ignore the secrecy. He confronted the client, demanding to know who he was and what he was doing with the sheep. The client gave no answer, staring silently before leaving. Days later, he returned, not to buy sheep but to exact vengeance. He broke into SUZY's father's home and killed him brutally with an axe. SUZY's pregnant mother managed to escape and moved to a distant village, keeping the horrifying truth hidden from her daughter. The revelation. The discovery left SUZY devastated. Everything she thought she knew about her family was shattered. Now, she finally understood the reason behind so many tragedies. Yet, at the same time, this gave her the strength to move forward. SUZY vowed she would not be defeated by the cruel fate that seemed to follow her. She promised herself she would uncover more about her past and fight to create a better future. If If you want to keep discovering dark secrets about your favorite characters, click the subscribe button now. Maybe it was a good decision after all, because the girl was deeply shaken after learning everything. But the most disturbing part wasn't even the violent way her father had died. It was the eerie similarity to the sheep incident that had led to her mother being accused of witchcraft. That old man initially seemed to offer comfort, but soon the narrative took a deeply unsettling turn. He shared his opinion on the matter, suggesting that it was likely one of Suzy's father's old clients who had killed all those sheep. That client must be an insane man, part of some twisted cult. He decided he was going to destroy your father's life and the lives of his entire family. He spent 4 long years searching for you, and when he found you, he chose to make you suffer slowly to justify all the time he wasted on this sick hunt. Those words struck Suzy like lightning. The fragile girl fell into despair. It was terrifying to imagine that such a sadistic man had meticulously planned every detail of this nightmare, accusing her mother of witchcraft, burning her alive, and leaving Suzy to wander the streets alone before finally finding her for the final act. For her, it became clear that she had a target painted on her back, and tears streamed uncontrollably down her face as she begged the old man to help her escape to a place where that cruel man could never find her. At that moment, the story took an even darker turn. Suzy's heart nearly stopped when the old man gave her a sinister smile and said her father never had any friends. The revelation was shocking. He had never been a friend of her family. He was, in fact, the mysterious client who had taken her father's life. Dark fate. After that horrifying confession, Suzy tried to flee. In pure panic, she ran, but she was quickly captured by the old man. He grabbed her tightly by the arms and dragged her into a dark and terrifying basement. The scene that awaited her was like something out of a nightmare. The room was filled with bodies, but they were far from ordinary. They were grotesque hybrids, part human, part sheep. Sheep faces were gruesomely stitched onto human bodies. Contrary to what Suzy might have imagined, these creatures were not the result of dark magic but of macabre surgical experiments carried out by the old man. He used sheep parts to create these beings, subjecting his victims to cruel procedures without anesthesia. As he dragged her, he explained that his experiments had never been successful. The creatures always died after a few days, and Suzy's own father had been one of the test subjects who hadn't survived. Nevertheless, the old man seemed determined to try again, convinced that this time would be different. For months, Suzy lived in that dark basement, enduring cruel experiments that completely transformed her body. With each passing day, the hope of escaping grew fainter, but the girl's courage never entirely disappeared. Finally, during a moment of carelessness by the old man, Suzy managed to free herself. Driven by sheer desperation, she attacked the man who had destroyed her life, killing him in a brutal act of self-defense. With trembling hands and a racing heart, Suzy fled the house, running deep into the forest. But when she stopped to catch her breath near a lake, she saw her reflection in the water. What she saw left her in shock. She was no longer the same girl. She had transformed into a grotesque creature, with the face of a sheep and the body of a child. The horror was indescribable. Knowing she would never be accepted by society, Suzy spent the following days wandering through the forest. Before we continue this heartbreaking tale, click subscribe to ensure you don't miss the next part of Suzy's dark story. The legend. Rumors about the girl with a sheep's face quickly spread. Many sought to hunt her down, believing she was a monster. However, few managed to approach her peacefully. To these individuals, Suzy shared her story, a tale of tragedy and cruelty that soon became famous across England. Not long after, Suzy's body succumbed to the experiments she endured. A severe infection claimed her life, bringing her heartbreaking journey to an end. This tragic ending inspired the creators of Peppa Pig to honor Suzy by creating the character Suzy Sheep. Unlike the real girl, the animated Suzy enjoys a happy life full of adventures alongside her best friend, Peppa. You might wonder how such a dark and sorrowful story inspired such an adorable character as Suzy Sheep from Peppa Pig. Well, the show's creators, Neville Astley and Mark Baker, drew from many inspirations during the development of the series. Often, they looked to other children's works, like the cartoon Olivia Pig. But in some cases, they turned to real-life stories like that of the young girl named Suzy. In a way, Suzy Sheep from Peppa Pig represents hope and positivity, things that the girl from 1833 never had the chance to experience. Perhaps this is why the character is so beloved. She embodies a universal message of resilience and friendship. So, what do you think about this connection between the real-life story and the cartoon? Did you ever imagine that a character like Suzy Sheep could have such a poignant backstory? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We've left 2 amazing videos for you to choose from. Just click on the one that looks the most fun. Thanks, and see you next time.